Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Last Honest Realtor. I am your host, David Fleming. Thank you for joining me today as we talk about the spring market. I know it's still January, but the spring market starts right after the new year, if that makes any sense at all. Now, if you are in the market as a buyer or a seller, I think you could benefit from today's podcast. We're going to talk specifically about listing strategies, what's working and what's not. Now, I'm going to start with an anecdote, a story. And this is a good one. Well, maybe not so much for me. I'm sitting at home on Sunday. My phone rings, and it says private number. Off to a good start. I answer the phone, and a voice says, hello, hi, I'm a buyer. And I said, okay. And she says, I'm interested in one of your listings. And I said, oh, no way, which one? And she gave the address. I said, fantastic, what can I help you with? And she said, well, can you tell me if the list price is what the sellers are looking for? So right off the bat, you guys know where this story is going. Now, some of you, and I'll group you into a category later, are thinking, well, you know what, David, that's a completely fair question. Totally normal. Again, give me a little bit of leeway with that. So I said to her, do you have an agent? And she said, no, we have a friend who has a real estate license, and if we make an offer, we'll do it through him. And I said, okay, that's not really what I meant. But anyways, what I wanted to explain to you, and she said, I don't need an explanation. It's a simple question. Is that price what they're going to accept or not? And you know what I wanted to say. But again, I live in fear of the negative, online chatter, Google review, RICO complaint, whatever. And also, today's day and age, I have to act as though I'm speaking on the stand or as a voice in the CBC, right? Don't put anything out there that you don't want on the front page of the newspaper, is what my wife's uncle tells me. Very smart guy. So I said, listen, if you'll indulge me, I work for the seller. I have a contract signed with the seller. I am not allowed to divulge any of their financial motivations. And that is a statute. That is under the Trust in Real Estate Services Act. And she said, I know, but this is all just a big waste of time if they're not going to accept the list price. I said, I understand your frustration. And then I tried to offer this thing called empathy, apparently. It works. I said, when I got into the business in 2004, it was already like this. People were already underlisting. It's always been like this. Now, right there, I said underlisting. So she should have realized that, yes, it's underlisted. She didn't pick up on it. She got angry and she said, it's just really stupid. This is really stupid how you guys always list properties like this. I just want to know if this is what it's going to sell for. Oh, she hit another mark. I said, what it's going to sell for? Well, that's a completely different conversation. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, what's it going to sell for? I don't know. Nobody knows. I could give you a guess. She said, well, what would you guess? I said, I can't tell you that. You're not a client under contract. Again, it goes back to the Trust in Real Estate Services Act. Not only that, you also are calling me about a listing that I have under a contract as a seller agent. She said, yeah, I know, but just what do you think it's going to sell for? I said, I can't tell you that. But the point is, real estate has no fixed value and it can fluctuate up, down, sideways. It might sell for this, it might sell for less, it might sell for more. And I didn't want to make it into an advertisement for why you should have a real estate agent because let's be honest, and this is a tangent within a tangent, I've been doing this for 20 and a half years. Not once has the self-represented buyer or the buyer making an offer through the, cashback discount brokerage or lawyer, not once have they ever been successful in a multiple offer scenario. So again, if you're watching this video or listening to this podcast and you're the person that's like, yeah, I'm going to self-represent and I don't need an agent. I don't know about that. Topic for another day. We've done that podcast. In fact, Matthew was suggesting earlier, maybe we should talk about that next week. So long story short, this person hung up on me and that was the phone call. But it got me thinking. There are a lot of new buyers out there that are going to have trouble navigating this spring market. And the reason they're going to have trouble navigating it, number one, well, like this particular caller, they're somewhat entitled, somewhat angry, justifiably. Life's hard. We're in very uncertain times. This buyer's frustrated. This buyer does not have an agent, so there's no experience and there's no knowledge. But also this market is still evolving. And so really that's going to be the topic of conversation today, the listing strategies that are working and the listing strategies that are not. How a listing strategy that works until it doesn't goes into this limbo period and then moves into sort of a plan B. And if you're a seller, what you've got to prepare for, and then if you're a buyer, what you've got to be on the lookout for. Now, I mentioned that there's a lot of new buyers out there. There's a bit of a change in the buyer demographic. So there are more buyers out there right now in this sort of 1 million to 1.5 million in Toronto. Go. Now, I mentioned there are a lot of new buyers in the marketplace, and there is a bit of a new demographic. Now, we're not talking about the condo market today. I'll touch on that later, but we're talking specifically for freeholds. Now, a lot of these new buyers are either as a result of or are being affected by the change in CMHC legislation from last fall, which of course raised the mortgage insurance cap from $1 million to $1.5 million. So you've got more entrants in this price point, which unfortunately is what I would call entry level in the city of Toronto, specifically in the central core. And a lot of these folks are younger. And so listen, I was young once, says every old person ever. I got into the business when I was 23 and a half years old. Been there, done that. So the previous generation told me what I was, and now I'm the old person telling the younger generation what they are. But I can say through my experience is they are a generation that feels empowered with knowledge and websites like House Sigma that tell them what houses are worth. So they don't need any representation whatsoever. Yeah, that's not true. As I said, nobody that's ever self-represented has submitted a winning bid on any of my listings in 21 years, or even close. Yeah, like that first caller. So point is not to give that generation flack, but eventually a lot of those folks do come around. But what we're seeing is there are a lot of younger people that say, you know, my friend Becky, she's a spin instructor, but she also has a real estate license and she's going to make the offer for us. That's great. And you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. Of course, Becky doesn't either. And your offer comes in under the list price with 3 conditions when there are 12 offers. So that's a lot of the market that's out there right now. I'm noticing with that phone call on the weekend, right, there's a little bit of frustration as well. But I would say, sure, let's turn this into an advertisement for why to use a buyer agent. All the more reason in a difficult market why you actually need representation. So it's, you know, I always say, like, when my car breaks down on the side of the road, I don't decide now is the time. I'm going to learn how to use a jack, and I'm going to get the tire up. I'm going to change it myself. Or a better example is, I don't, look after my own money. I don't run my own portfolio. I mean, I make the macro decisions, but I'm not day trading stocks. Now, again, I know you're different, bro. You day trade stocks because you are really good at it. Says every single male aged 18 to 45 who gambles on professional sports. These are topics for other days, I know. My point is I believe in specialization. And I have not seen this younger generation that has House Sigma's estimator of value, even though it doesn't know that that house is next to an old hydro house, which is why it's worth 30% less than what their estimator says. Yeah, that's what real estate agents know. So this is a lot of the market. I think I've touched on that point enough. The strategies themselves, they're evolving. And again, this demographic doesn't quite get it. They don't quite understand. So I'll say this again anecdotally, and I'm not just blaming the buyers. I'm blaming the buyer agents. We had a listing, and this is going to be part of today's story, that was listed for $1,199,000. And it eventually sold for $1.4 million. But it was listed for $1,099,000, and there was an agent that booked a showing. And when we relisted and terminated and put it back out at $1,429,000, this agent canceled the showing and then put in the notes, well out of my client's range. All right. So it was listed for $1,199,000. And when we relisted for $1,400 and change, this agent said, well out of my client's range. This agent then went and booked a showing on another one of our listings at $1,199,000 with an offer date. What? Can you not do any research? I mean, the first house, they could have looked up what these people paid for it 4 years ago. The second house, they could have looked up what they paid for it 7 years ago. It just need a little bit of research. But a lot of the buyer agents aren't doing it. I had another buyer agent. This podcast is going off the rails. I had another buyer agent. You ready for this? And again, some of you will be like, David, that's a totally normal question. Buyer agent emailed me and said, hi, David, I'm showing your property on Saturday. Could you please send me all the comparable sales that you used in pricing this and with your adjustments? Absolutely. I can do that. Is there anything else you'd like for me to do for you? Would you like me to maybe open the hood of your car and change the oil? Could I pick your kids up from daycare? Why don't I go cook dinner in your kitchen after cleaning your house top to bottom? These are things that are not my job. Yeah. And then he said, these are things that are not my job. Again, some people might say, David, that's a totally normal question. Every agent handles it differently. I'm not a jerk in that respect because, believe it or not, I need that agent's really crappy offer to use as leverage on offer night. People are also going to have fault with that. I can't believe it. The world's so unfair. So here it is, guys. There are 2 major strategies in real estate. This is going to sound really groundbreaking. Ready? Strategy 1, list with an offer date. Strategy 2, list with no offer date. Boom. That's it. Let's end the podcast. No, that's it. There are 2 strategies. But it is so difficult to decide what to do. Now, here's how I advise my clients. And I mentioned in a past podcast, last May, the market slowed down. By June, it was really tough. If you guys have listened to this podcast, this is like the 4th time you're hearing this story, but I'm doing this again with today's sellers, so bear with me. I have a shared Google Sheet. Every listing that's like theirs, I put in the Google Sheet. We track the offer dates. Are offer dates working? Are they not working? What percentage of properties are selling on offer date? How many are selling in the limbo period, which is in between? And then how many are being relisted? So as we did last year, we watched offer dates go from a 30% success rate all the way down to about a 10% success rate. And guess what? When we listed our property with an offer date, the offer date failed. No kidding. So again, you take that strategy, or rather you take that research, and then you advise the client on their strategy. Now, if you were to see that 5% of offer dates are working, you would be insane to list with an offer date. Again, last year's situation, the sellers wanted to do it. Advise them against it. We did it. It didn't work. We eventually got their house sold after relisting. This year, coming into the year, I had 2 listings. Well, actually, we had 3 side listings, but 2 of note for this podcast that we were trying to decide which strategy to enact. Pretty sure that we're going to go with the offer date, right? Which is under list. Take a house that's worth $1.3 million, list it at $999 with an offer date, and get multiple offers. And again, if this is your first time listening to this podcast, I am the devil because I suggested taking a $1.3 million property and listing it for $999 with an offer date. I can't believe that. It's so unfair. I get it. And with that logic, I should just give you the keys and you should move in with your family and we should just give it to you. I get all that. In the context of commerce and me working in the best way on behalf of my seller clients to get them the most money within the confines of the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act and the Trust and Real Estate Services Act, yes, you're allowed to price a property at what you'd like to price it at and then set an offer date and see what happens. So in trying to decide, do we work with an offer date or do we not? You have to see what else is moving out there. And early this year, when we listed the first property, which again, we underlisted with an offer date, I started charting all of the sales, or all the listings rather, and noted that of the first 18 properties that came out, 13 were relists from last year. So you want to look at what's the inventory like. And again, now I'm giving advice to you, the seller, trying to decide what should you be doing here with your listing. If you're trying to decide whether or not to underlist and hold back offers or whether to list with offers anytime, you need to read the market. How many properties are coming out total? How many of these are relists from last year? Because I would call those kind of junky retreads. Of the properties that are actually new, how many are quality listings? Now, when we listed our first property, we noted that of the 18 listings, 13 were relists. Of the 5 that weren't, 4 were junk. 1 was a quality listing. And we said, hey, there's not a lot of inventory out there. The buyers are out. Let's go with the underlist strategy. So we listed this property for $1,199,000. And here's where I'll go into, as I said, there's 2 strategies. 1 is offers anytime, and 2 is an offer date. But when you go with strategy 1, I'm going to take a $1.3 million house, I'm going to list it at $999, I'm going to set an offer date. When you go with that strategy, there's an A, a B, and a C. A, your offer date works. B, your offer date doesn't work, and then you have the period in between the offer date and when you relist, which is what I call the limbo period. That's B. And C is after you relist. So again, you have to talk to your clients about this. If you're an agent listing, if you're a seller, you have to understand I could sell on offer night, I could sell during the limbo period, or I could sell after the relist. So let me walk you through what happened with our first listing. We listed for $1,199,000. We had a lot of showings. Everything was lining up to be great. Part of the issue with this house, if I may, was the sellers had only been there 4 years. And a lot of agents were looking up what they paid 4 years ago. And then they were just deciding that we wanted some ungodly sum of money because they acted as though the market won't decide what it's worth and that these people are going to need X, which is to say what they paid plus real estate fees, legal fees, land transfer tax, and I don't know, some nice little appreciation. So the listing history in this case actually worked against us because I had to call agents. And again, I call every agent for feedback. And I had to talk to people and listen to them say, yeah, I just don't think we can afford what they're looking for. Well, what do you think they're looking for? 1.6. Are you kidding? No, we're not looking for that. right? And there's where I will give an indication of their financial motivations or what they're looking for, because I absolutely have to, because it works in our best interests. It's prudent. So getting as many people as we could back on side, having them sort of understand that these folks aren't just going to hold out for an ungodly sum of money that's unrealistic. We get to the offer date. There are 4 offers. Now, something happened here that I don't believe I've had happen in about, I don't remember, 10, 12 years. We more or less had it sold. And I say more or less because legally it was not sold. But when you're working with somebody and you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and then you've got a verbal, which isn't worth anything legally, then you go to sign it back. Say you're changing the avenue to road, or you put 75,000, but then you wrote 70,000. My point is, we had hammered out the deal. It went on a little bit longer than it should have. And I'll get back to you in 10 minutes, became 40. And then 40 minutes turned into an hour and a half. And I've been doing this long enough to know when my spidey sense is tingling, it's for a reason. And the buyer backed out. They got cold feet. That's not the point of today's story. The point of today's story is talking about these strategies and whether or not they're working. But this perfectly illustrates my A, B, and C, my offer date, limbo period, and then relist in terms of what your strategy looks like on a micro level. So it falls apart on offer date. What happens then is you're in the limbo period. And again, you want to talk about this spring's listing strategies, what's working and what's not. In the end, we got the property sold, so it worked. But my goodness, the grind to get there, and this is where a lot of the listing agents are having trouble. This is where the sellers are really confused, and this is where the buyers, some of them don't understand or are missing opportunities. So the day after offer date, should you relist the property immediately at your new price? No. As a seller, you're under no obligation. Doing the right thing would be not leaving up offers reviewed on January 5th, on January 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. But again, as a listing agent, I would say I can't do anything if the sellers haven't directed me and if they haven't signed something. As a realist, I can say strategically we're in the limbo period. The limbo period has to be played methodically. You are using this to your advantage. So I'm trying to think of an analogy, but maybe I'll tell you the story first and then come up with an analogy. The story goes like this. If we terminate and relist tomorrow at the new price, everyone knows they won't call me. If we don't do anything, they don't know, and they will call me. What's the analogy now? It's like lining people up outside of a nightclub to make them think that it's packed inside. I don't know if that analogy rings true. But point being, how do you get people to call you? You make them question what's happening. You make them kind of line up. You force them, through them not having the information that they desire, to call you and ask. So if we have a property listed at 1199, and then the next day we terminate and relist at 1429, everybody knows. Instead, we did nothing. The next day I had 20 phone calls. Now the irony is, probably 15 of those phone calls were from agents that were bringing out listings that were like, you've got to put a good price on this. Someone said to me, and I quote, "Your listing is the gateway to the spring market on the east side." I was like, thanks. And then another agent gave me crap and said, you had 4 offers and you couldn't get it sold. Agents, what can I say? They were out to ensure that the property sold for a good price so that their successive listings could follow. Now, the other agents were asking, hey, what happened last night? And I said, we had 4 offers. We almost had it sold. The buyer got cold feet, walked away. So then they start to ask, well, what do you want? Again, I would answer that if A, my clients allowed me to, and B, it was in their best interests. But I didn't answer it because I don't know what their client's willing to pay. If I had said, oh, they want 1.3, what if their client was willing to pay 1.9? See where I'm coming from? That's how we do our job. So in that limbo period, it is crucial to communicate with the agents that are communicating with you, that are calling you, that are telling you that their clients are waiting for their mortgage pre-approval or they're seeing what happens on another offer date. And I had throughout that limbo period about 4 agents that I really thought one of these guys is going to sell it. Now again, sellers, oh my goodness, they've moved out, they've moved back in, they thought they were going to sell it on the offer night. I can't believe it. Now we're home with the kids. We can't do a showing at 8:30 at night. The kids are in bed. Hey, you know what? It's tough. It really is. And in a perfect world, we all sell an offer night, but I'm telling you about a situation where we didn't. So we're in the limbo period. Offers are on Monday. Limbo period starts on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, I think, you know what? I'm going to sell it. There's this one agent, I know the guy, he went in last night, he said his client's super interested, he just couldn't get his, together. Well, he didn't buy it. And then on Wednesday, it was another lady, super nice lady. She's like, oh, my clients are redoing their pre-approval. It's just such tough timing. And I thought she's going to bring me an offer. And they didn't. Then amazingly, on Thursday, the people that we were going to do the deal with that backed out because they had cold feet, their agent called me and I thought they're going to buy it, but they didn't. So the limbo period did not bear fruit. How long can you leave a listing up that says offers on January 4th and not change it? So to me, if you have offers on Monday night, you cannot leave it through the next weekend. And there's no written rule on this. Guys, you can go and look at MLS right now, and you will see listings that say offers graciously reviewed September 30th. I mean, that's so wrong. So tell me, David, you're splitting hairs or it's a gray area. Okay, then I'm making my own rule. You can't let it go through the next weekend. And last year, I remember there was an agent that did an open house at the under list pre-offer date price after not selling on offer date and not adjusting the price. So long story short, the clients put it back out at 1,429 on the Friday. We start to get some showings. Now, ironically, there were a couple agents who canceled their showings because they thought at 1,199, maybe the client could get it for 1,199, even though it sold for $1.5 million 4 years ago, right? So through the weekend, we continue to get phone calls. And now we're in phase 3 of this, right? Or I said ABC, so we'll call it C. Now we're in that relist period. And what ended up happening was interesting. The floodgates open, so to speak. We had an agent that brought an offer. And am I going to talk real prices? I don't know if I can because people could maybe figure out what listing this is. All right, so we'll use real prices. So the offer comes in at $1,350,000. So you might say, oh, hey, that's way more than the 1,199 you were listed at. Again, that was underlisted, and that was for the purpose of soliciting multiple offers. We did get 4, but then we relisted at 1,429. So the offer of 135, it's conditional. It's not exactly what we're looking for. But another agent calls me after I page this offer out. So here's the thing about leverage, and maybe this is human nature. You want what you can't have, or you want what someone else wants. 2 days ago, hey, listen, we're open for business. Nobody's there. As soon as I page out that offer, and excuse me, I shouldn't gloss over that. When an offer is registered, when you're in receipt of an offer, you notify or page, because I'm old fashioned, any agent that has expressed an interest in it. So any agent that's booked a showing since the relist, any agent that booked a showing at the previous price, or anybody that's even emailed you and expressed an interest in it. So sure enough, another agent calls and says, oh my gosh, we were going to make an offer. Oh, really? Yeah, I've been waiting to hear from you. Where have you been? What happens is, as soon as you get that first offer, that agent jumps into action. So this agent says, yeah, we're going to bring you an offer. It's just such funny timing and it's Sunday and everything. And let me see what I can do. No longer than 30 seconds after I hang up with her, another agent calls me and says, hey, I see you've got an offer registered. I was going to bring you one. Now, all of a sudden, we're looking at potentially 3 offers. Yeah. And again, you go back to what we were discussing earlier about this strategy 1, underlist with an offer date. Strategy 2, offers anytime. Within that first strategy, you have your A, B, and C. You have your offer date sale. You have your in the limbo period sale. And then you have your after the relist sale. And here we are after the relist looking at potentially getting 3 offers. Now, it's not that it's ironic. It's not that it's lucky. It's that it's calculated. It's that it's known because you've been through this. I say you, assuming you're the agent or the seller. You've been through this process before. You have enough experience to understand this is how it works. But again, you've got to play the cards right, and you've got to carefully craft after a failed, I'm going to use the word failed, after a failed offer night where you didn't fail, the property didn't fail, the market failed to sell it, let's say. After that failed offer date, you're now entering the limbo period. What do you do? How do you play it? Who do you talk to, and how do you talk to them? Then if you do not have a sale in those 3 to 4 days of the limbo period, you are relisting it, and then you're attempting to sell it. So we got the second offer. Second offer. It's a great offer. It's unconditional. It's substantially higher than the first. So you go back to the first and you say, listen, I'm sorry. I know you've been working on this for 4 or 5 days. We have another offer. What can you do? That agent says we can come up a tiny bit in price. We can't take the conditions out. That's it. It's not going to work. Now, the third agent said, I need to go back and see it one more time with the client. Can you wait until tomorrow? Absolutely, we cannot wait. And thus, that agent was out. So we did end up selling it, sold it for over $1.4 million, which was far superior to what we had on the offer night. And it was far superior to anything that had been uttered verbally or intimated in any way during that limbo period. So is that a successful listing strategy? Gonna leave a beat here. Is that a successful listing strategy? Or I would say, was that a success? The goal to sell the property, of course, was met. That's our job, to sell the property. Now, there's a caveat. Well, David, you're not going to sell that for $1.2 million. No, of course not. But the goal is to sell the property, and the property was sold. Is the goal to sell the property on the offer night? Ideally, but there's the thing, guys. In this market, you cannot put all your eggs in that basket. So believe it or not, I think I went maybe the first 15, 16 years of my career. No, wait, I need to do the math. It's probably 2017. So I'd say for the first 13 years, you're like, I don't care. First 13 years of my career before I'd had a failed offer night. And the first time it happened, I thought, this is massive. This is huge. I cannot believe we're doing this. Now it's almost built into the strategy. So there's that adage, right? A failure to prepare is preparing to fail. In this case, let's play around with that a little bit. Because if you can explain to the clients, I'm speaking from agent perspective, or if you are the seller, if you can figure out that ideally we are going to sell an offer night, but that's not the be all and end all, and that there is a path B and a path C, if you can figure that out, then you can strategize accordingly. And that is so incredibly important in this market. So where people are going wrong in this market is, I guess, starting with the A part of the strategy, offer night. If you simply accept the highest offer on the offer night without ever considering your plan B or C, I think that's a mistake. Now, part of the buyer pool is going to say, and you know my most hated word on the planet is should. Part of the buyer pool is going to say, well, you know, a buyer should have to sell on the offer date. Okay, cool. What if they get 0 offers? They got a $1.3 million house. They list for $999. They get 0 offers. What if they have a $1.3 million house? They list for $899. They get 1 offer for $899. Here comes that voice. Well, then they should have thought of that before they listed at $899 and tried to trick everybody. Womp womp. I don't want to sound unsympathetic, but you absolutely do not have my sympathy in that regard. What kind of world do we live in where we start to force people? Yeah, you have to sell. Say what you want about the market, but I don't think the answer is forcing. Then who's going to do it? The government? So strategy A, sell an offer night. You're not getting anywhere close to the price that you want or need or what have you. And again, completely subjective. Somebody could want or need a ridiculous price. I don't believe that anyone should be forced or should have to sell. But if you build this into your strategy in advance, okay, then maybe after that, the next day, see what's out there. That's your B strategy. And it's not what we want. We want to sell an offer date. But I had 2 properties last year when the market got really tough. Offer date did not materialize. Sorry, I should say the offer date did materialize. A sale did not materialize on the offer date. And then we sold during that limbo period. So take a listing, $1,099,000, and we're looking for 1.4. And we don't get it. Offer date comes, we get 1 offer for 115. Again, I'm not entertaining the person's like, you should have to take that. So what do? The next morning, we do nothing. The world keeps turning. And agents call. And an agent calls and says, I might do this. Another agent calls, says, my client might offer this. And eventually somebody puts an offer on paper for $1,385,000. My client says, I'll take it. Great. We didn't have to sell it on offer date. All was not lost. And this is what sellers need to understand. And coming into this market, look, we may get back into a market that is completely sellers. There's 15 offers on everything and everything sells on offer date. But if there isn't, you've got to understand what that plan B is in that limbo period. Now, of course, the plan C, which I had just explained, is that the limbo period does not bear fruit. Now you have to relist. When you are relisting, and I hate to say this, you still have to list a little bit higher than what you were willing to accept because buyers are going to expect to negotiate. Now, it's funny because when we put that other one back at 1,429, an agent calls and they're like, so are you guys doing another offer date? You're like, wait, what? Another? Oh my God. Real. If you're not watching, that's me doing a fishing Gimmick? Yeah. Reel them in because you caught a big fish. That agent's asking at your new price, do you have an offer date? Listen, as great as that sounds, that person's not bringing you an offer if they just really don't know what they're doing. So again, point being, a lot of the buyer pool and the buyer agents really still do not understand. So point is here, you've got to still overlist because they're going to expect to negotiate. You go from having an offer date with 4 offers and having all the leverage to now having gone through the limbo period, being listed again, and now the leverage position changes. They're going to want to negotiate. So it brings me to, well, let's say we're caught up, so to speak. I always film these a week in advance. So it brings me to the current stats that I have, which by the time you listen to this or watch will be slightly out of date. Going back to the east side, and I'm going to kind of name some names here. When we were looking at the listings coming out in the second and third week of January, a house on Torrens was the first one to sell for a good amount, 250,000 over list. And again, I'm talking in this listed for $1.1 million, $1.2 million range. Then we had this condo town on Kingston sold for 255 over list. That was great. Then we had a Riverdale listing sell for 355,000 over list. It was a complete gut. But again, that was an $899 and it goes for 1,235. Where's the 1.4, the 1.5, the 1.6? That's what we're waiting for. So sure enough, along comes Woody Crest, 15 offers, sells for almost 300,000 over list, $1,450,000. So by the time we get to, my team and I listed 2 properties on the east side in and around this price range last week. Again, we're working with our sellers and updating them every night on a shared online Google Doc that has all of the listings, all of the list prices and specs, beds, baths, lot size, parking, etc., and a column for notes. Something like, this is hysterically overpriced. And of course, we have a column for, is it a relist, the offer date, and then we update it when there are sales. So there was a bully offer on a house on Wiley, $325,000 over list. Great. So we're starting to see the offer dates work. We saw our first big bully offer on the east side. And again, there's not a lot of inventory here. But as a seller, it is absolutely crucial that you do your homework in advance. You are doing your homework as you go, which is that shared online sheet that I painstakingly update every single night at 11:45. My clients will back me up on that. And then you figure out what your A, B, and C looks like when you are listed. It's not happening in the condo market. People ask, David, would it be the same if you're listing a 1-bedroom condo? No, not at all. In fact, I don't know why anyone would list any condo with an offer date right now, unless you have a condo that's worth 500 and you list for like 349 as a gimmick, or you have the sexiest hard loft in the city of Toronto. No, this is specifically geared towards the freehold market, which I think will be very busy this spring, but which I think right now has 2 problems, a left and a right, a buyer and a seller. The buyers are uninformed. The buyers are naive. Some of them are willfully naive or willfully ignorant. I think a lot of those first-time buyers, the younger generation, they want to do it themselves. They don't want to hire an agent. They eventually come around. I do get a lot of those folks. They're like, hey, we've been looking on our own for 9 months, or, we had a friend and he was a part-time agent and he made an offer for us, but we're ready to be represented. A lot of them don't. A lot of them don't come around. And, listen, I've got offers on a listing tonight. Let's say I have 8 offers and it's listed for $1.2 million. I'm going to have an offer of $1.2 million with 3 conditions. It's going to happen. And sometimes the agent calls me and they're like exasperated. You can see the hand going through the hair. They're like, yeah, dude, I don't want to put this offer in, but the client's bugging me. My answer would be, well, had you prepared the client in advance, they wouldn't do this because you would have instilled them with wisdom and knowledge and experience and value, and they would see the error of their ways. And sometimes it's an agent that texts you consistently, hey, any update? Yeah, here's the update. Believe it or not, even though there were 8 offers, 7 people offered less than you did. Oh, and you had 3 conditions, but they all had 8 conditions. Again, we're at the mercy of the knowledge or lack of knowledge and experience of the buyers and the buyer agents. And again, it's I can imagine how that comes off. And I, listen, you like me or you don't, but I'm being honest with you. And it's in any industry, right? There's better and worse. Look at any industry. And I'm saying there's a lot of buyer agents, and God love them, and I'll help them if I can. There's a lot of them that don't have the experience. And there's something to be said for, excuse the tangent, we've talked about this before, when you're a buyer agent, if your buyer tells you to go and run and jump off a pier, you don't have to do it. right? It might not be to yours or their benefit. So if your buyer or agent says, okay, let's offer under the list price with 5 conditions when there's 9 offers, you can say to them, guys, listen, we're not going to be successful here. So, and then go with a different plan. Planning to win is not a bad thing. Empowering your client's not a bad thing. Giving your client knowledge, teaching them about the market, these are not bad things. And a lot of buyer agents are so afraid of doing that. Now, the flip side, right? I said the left and the right, the buyers and the sellers. The flip side are the sellers. Some of them want too much money, age-old story. Some of them have unrealistic expectations about the process or about offers. And then some of them just aren't patient. And I've seen a few sales this year where I thought, oh my God, they sold it for that? I saw a couple of offer dates where I was like, oh, wow, why'd they take that? Now, some sellers took it because they had to sell. Some sellers took it because they didn't know there's an alternative. As I said, you go with the strategy of underlisting and holding an offer date. You can sell it on the offer date. You can sell it in that limbo period between an offer date and a relist, or you can wait 3-4 days in limbo, relist it at a higher price, and see what happens. Some sellers do not want to take that risk. But let's say that you own a house that you think is worth $1.5 million and you list it for $1,249. Offer date comes, your highest offer is $135. You don't have to take that. No one's got the proverbial gun to your head. And in fact, if you're my client, and I can't tell you what to do, but I would say, hey guys, you don't have to sell, right? You're selling first to go and buy a condo to downsize, or, you're moving across the world. And even if people do have to sell because they've bought, your closing date is in May. We've got time. Why not take none of these offers and then relist it 1.5? So I am surprised to see a couple of sales that just didn't make sense. Woulda, coulda, shoulda got more. And far be it for me to say, it's up to the seller to decide. It's up to the agent to advise. But within the underlist and holdback strategy, there has never been more importance for this understanding and planning and strategizing and evaluating in advance with this sort of A, B, and C as I referred to it. So I want to come back to a comment I made earlier when I said, I don't believe that people should leave a listing up for months at a time and not change the offer date. For me, my rule is I do it before the next weekend. And I said, I'm making my own rule. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is that when it comes to real estate, there are a lot of practices for which there is no guidance whatsoever. An example, on an offer date, what practices are there written down? You have to record all offers. You have to notify everybody of the existence of offers or the retraction of offers. Other than that, well, it's up to you. Do you want to take the highest? Do you want to go back to some people? Do you want to go back to all the people? Do you want to ask them to improve 20 times? Do you want to do it in an hour? Do you want to do it in 5 hours? It's up to the agent. So when I say I'm making my own rule here, what I mean is that there's too little and too much. And I always try to find that balance in the middle. And I believe that when you have an offer date that doesn't work, for you to immediately turn around and relist it, you're selling your client short. You're not giving them the opportunity to catch their breath, slow down, make a decision. Don't be rushed. You don't have to do anything. And that's me working for my seller. I could say as a buyer agent, hey, you can't leave this up here. September 30th offers, it's January. Okay, call it a gray area if you want to. But when I say I'm making my own rule here, I think that if you were to have a failed offer made on a Monday or a Tuesday, and you put the relist up on the Thursday or Friday, absolutely nothing wrong with it. And if you want to leave it up through the weekend, it says offers on Monday, and by Saturday it still says offers the previous Monday, I disagree, but that's up to you. And again, if there's a rule against it, show it to me. There isn't. But part of being a buyer in this market is understanding these nuances. Part of being a seller in this market is understanding these nuances. And above all, when it comes to representation, is having somebody that can guide you through it. So, I hope today's podcast wasn't too confusing. There was a lot of ones and twos and A, B, and C's, but the point really comes down to, I guess, knowledge, experience, representation, and guiding you through it. And I started this by talking about unrepresented buyers who don't want to use real estate agents. Hey, to each their own. As I said, I'm not going to get the car jack out and lay underneath my car and change the tire on the busy highway. It's not what I do, and I don't think I'd be good at it. I also mused that every male aged 18 to 45 thinks they're good at sports gambling. If you were to ask 100 of them, do you win? I think probably half would be like, yeah. No, casinos always win. That's what happens. And if you're watching or listening to this, there are no winner gamblers. I'm sorry. I always use that example because it's where I feel like the most people lie to themselves. So again, I go back to that buyer that are maybe lying to themselves. They can do it themselves. Guys, I'm telling you, it's hard. It's really difficult. I just did a 45-minute podcast about the nuances of an offer date, the days after it, and then the relist. It's tough, it's complicated, and it's happening. And it's going to continue to evolve as we go through January into February and prime market territory. So guys, that is it for me for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Wherever you get your podcast, please remember to like, comment, or subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, drop me a comment. I always love reading them. And we'll see you next time here on The Last Honest Realtor.